Welcome to My Life, Tanya Applied, with Rabbi Simon Jacobson, a journey into the deepest teachings of Torah and their application to our personal, emotional, and psychological lives.
A good tavach, a good week. We continue our journey in the life-changing Sefer Tanya. This program is made possible by Arena Lights LLC, and it's in honor and memory of Rabbi Yosef Halevi Weinberg Olav Hashalom, Rabbi Moshe Pinchas HaKohen Katz Olav Hashalom, Rabbi Yael HaKohen Khan Olav Hashalom, and it's the schus and merit of Rabbi Zev Yecheskel HaKohen Arisha Katz Le'edich Yomim V'Shanim Tevis for many long, healthy years. We are in the middle of chapter 24, Perek Chav Daled in Tanya, and again in the Alter Rebbe's inimitable way, analyzing and dissecting the very anatomy of an Aveda, of a person in that state. Now remember, considering that Elokus, godliness, is the only true reality, as we learned earlier in chapters 20 and 21, the only true reality. All of existence is simply God's speech, God speaking. So of course, if a person was constantly cognizant of that 24/7, they wouldn't be capable of doing an Aveda. They wouldn't be capable of defying and doing anything against God's will. It's like doing something that's self-destructive. So you have to say that the only ability that a person could do something self-destructive, like putting your hand in fire, is either you don't know it's fire or you don't know the fire damages you. And that's what he called back then Hester Ponim, the tzimtzumim that God employs to conceal the divine presence. Because again, if the divine presence was completely open and revealed, you wouldn't be capable of doing something that goes against your very essence, your very life. And that's why indeed, why a neshama, when threatened in a time of crisis, we're ready to give its life before bowing down to any false god, even if it's not with complete faith, even on an action-based, because it recognizes and senses the danger. It's like sensing the fire, and you don't want to get burned. Why would anybody want to be burned or hurt or destroyed? God forbid. So the only reason is because we don't feel it. That's called Hester Ponim. In this chapter 24, he translates that, and it's with the Maimer Chazal, Kishishta, about the Avaseta, where it says, Ein Adam Ever Avera Elim Ken Nichnas Bei Ruach Shtus, Kishishta Ishte. If you think about it, that's the Nigladika language, the Talmudic language, of what a tzimtzum is. Because it doesn't say a person does Aveda because they have a desire. It's only because there's a moment of blindness, a moment of insanity. Nichnas Bei Ruach Shtus, a spirit of insanity, a spirit of blindness, a spirit of folly, however you translate it. That's the concealment. So in other words, Be'etzim, essentially a person is not capable of that. There has to be some other force, this Ruach Shtus. I quoted the Rambam, Sof Perek Beis in Hilchos Gerushin, where he says something similar. He talks there about you compel someone until they say I want to. Even if they don't want to give a get, you compel them. But they're only saying it because they're being forced. So that's not willing. So the Rambam says, no, every Id wants to do mitzvahs and wants to stay away from Avedas. And it's Yitzrei hu she'ansei. There's another force here at work. What he wants is to do what the Torah says. It's the Yetzer Hara, or here he calls it Ruach Shtus, she'ansei. Maybe that's even the source of the Rambam. Yetzer Hara is compelling him to do something opposite of his natural will. Because no natural person would naturally put their hand in fire. So it's Yitzrei hu she'ansei. What Bezdin is doing is simply removing that obstacle. So they're not forcing him, they're only removing the force that is forcing him to do opposite of his nature. Now why is this so relevant? Because he wants to explain here in Tanya how every Aveda, not just Aveda Zarah, anything, even a smidgen, anything that goes against God's will is a form of Aveda Zarah, Layilacha. The only thing is you don't feel it. With Avodah Zarah, when it's blatant, this woman who could be tempted would give her life, like he explains. But because of the Ruach Shtus, that convinces her to be able to do something like that because she doesn't feel that she's being disconnected. However you explain it. So the Alter Rebbe is explaining in Tanya, you are disconnected. Your hand is being burned. That's the whole point. That's why we learn Torah. It's telling you, even though you don't feel it, or you can minimize it, the fact is it is being burned. So when Rabbi Akiva, for example, was asked the question how you didn't go learn Torah all the time. They can't go 3 days without Torah, like you can't go without water. And he gave the example of the fox that came to the sea and was hungry and told the fish, come out of the sea, let's party. And the fish said to the fox, they say, you're the wisest, you're the wisest of animals, you're not so wise. If we come out of the water, not just considering the fox was looking for a meal, it's not for us an option. Because we go out of water, then we have no life. It's not possible for a fish to live outside of the sea. So Yid, to live without Torah is like living without water. Exactly like we're saying here, without oxygen. And the opposite is true, doing something that's damaging, destructive. Now the Alter Rebbe continues. You could talk about the Ruach Shtus, that you don't feel that, in this case, that this woman violating her fidelity is disconnecting. But something goes further here. The Alter Rebbe goes further. There are times where a person knows that what they're doing is wrong. And furthermore, they still feel a connection to God. But they say it's not like Avodah Zarah. It's not such a bad sin, so to speak. So it's like the difference. Yes, I may get a little touched by the fire, but it's not going to burn me up completely. It's not going to destroy me. They minimize. So the Alter Rebbe adds, he wants to bavon and qualify also that given situation. So he says like this: "Va'hefresh etzlo ben iser niyaf li iser shtachava le'avodah zarah." And the distinction that she may make in her mind between the prohibition of bowing to an idol and that of adultery, essentially arguing to herself that the latter is not so severe and therefore more tolerable, says the Alter Rebbe, who gam kein ruach shtus de klippe. This argument is also from the delusional spirit of the klippe, from this moment of insanity or this blindness. Now, why is this vital? Because the Alter Rebbe wants, you could say, you know what, the whole concept of doing something against God, that's delusional. It's against your nature. It's like putting your hand in fire and not realizing the fire burns or not realizing it's fire. But the fact that you minimize and say, it's not, maybe a little fire, but not so bad, maybe that's coming from a rational place. He says that distinction is also part of the delusion, part of the Ruach Shtus. So this goes even deeper. That means that any iota of doing something that's unhealthy, you don't have to jump into a fire and to be destroyed. Even is also coming from an unnatural place. So this only underscores even more so why to each person. Because a person essentially wants to be healthy, and a healthy person is connected to the source of life, which is godliness. and you don't need to jump into a whole fire or do something completely self-destructive. Every little thing that goes against that is equally destructive. And if a person tries to distinguish and make it less, so that also is coming from the Ruach Shtus. One of the things you take away from this is how, by the Alter Rebbe, absolute divine unity is such that doesn't leave room for one iota. Now you'd think, okay, fine, we don't do something that's a sin, but we all have our little lives, we have our own plans. Why can't I have a little independence, so to speak? So on paper, it sounds nice. But if you think about it, what do you mean independence from what? Independence from life? Independence from reality, from truth? So if you see a Elokus as another thing in your life, so okay, there's time I give to God, there's a time when I give to myself, there's a time I give to my family. But if you see as God, Eined Mavade, that's the only true reality, and therefore the only thing that's really healthy, and you're completely in water, it's like a fish saying, I'll go out of water for a minute. Yes, you could survive, but that's not where you want to be. You want to be in the water all the time. You want to be Chayenu ve'erich yamenu, Torah is. It's your life and your sustenance. So you could read this piece and read it like, talk about, look how terrible it is being disconnected from God, or you could see the other way around. Look how beautiful it is to be connected. And as a result, anything opposite of that is something that is completely mufrach, completely not possible. Not even your realm of possibility, because it's just opposite of life. And that's where the Ruach Shtus comes in, as a result of the Tzimtzumim, as I said before. Okay. Now he continues. So this guf is coming from the Ruach Shtus HaMalbev Shel Nefesh Shel Kis. Now he says, how deep does this Ruach Shtus, does this moment of folly, this moment of insanity, or blindness, or delusion, if you wish, how deep does it reach? Now that you said to me it's not natural, so again, let's go back to the example. So anyone putting their hand in fire, God forbid, it's either they don't know it's fire, or they don't know the damage that fire can do, or they don't feel the damage. It's all part of the Ruach Shtus. But the fact of the matter is that's not the natural person. So are we saying that the Ruach Shtus has now taken control, this delusional spirit, this insanity? Are you like totally insane? Obviously not. First of all, you're responsible for your behavior. But now he's going back to something that was a critical point, to realize it's not you. So what is you? Like the Rambam says, you are connected to Hashem. So he says now these words. So where does this level reach? And furthermore, let's ask another question. Why is the Ruach Shtus effective when it comes to like adultery, but it won't be effective when it comes to idol worship? There, you could also say you don't feel that the Avodah Zarah is affecting you. You could ask that question too. It's concealed, so you're putting yourself in fire, maybe, in full fire, but you don't tell. You can't tell because of Ruach Shtus. So he says like this, because he said, "Who gam ken Ruach Shtus the klipa amelubeshes lenefesh alekis." This is the key thing here. The Ruach Shtus is melubefesh shel nefesh alekis. It's like a levush of the nefesh alekis. Remember, the nefesh alekis on its own is not capable of anything except godliness. But now, the nefesh alekis has manifested inside of a nefesh habamis, a behemoth. And the nefesh habamis is the Ruach Shtus like a tzimtzum and concealment, and that's why it obscures. The truth and reality. But the fact that it's Melbav Shel Nefesh Elokis, how far does that reach? So he says it only reaches ad b'chinas chachma shaba, v'lo yad b'chlal, only to the level of chachma in the Nefesh Elokis, but not including it. Because remember, chachma shel Nefesh Elokis, that's when he went back to Ner Hashem Nishma Sodom back in Perek Chof, even earlier, Perek Yud Ches and Yud Tes, I should say, that the Chachma Nefesh Elokis retains his divine nature. It can be concealed in lower levels, but the Chachma itself is never affected. And that's indeed why Avodah Zarah touches there, because you see it with your own eyes. You see the fire. And the Chachma suddenly says, no, there I will not go. But since it does cover up lower levels of your being, your midas, your emotions, so you can have an impulse that goes against your very nature, but the Ruach Shtus is concealing its effect on you, or it's minimizing its effect. And as we learned there, Mepnei Eir Hashem, Hamulubish B'Chachma, because of the divine light and energy that is present in Chachma. Because Chachma always retains the divine spark. Now the divine is everywhere, but in lower levels it's more concealed. Keniska Li'il, as discussed before in chapter 19. So this is a vital piece because Alter Rebbe wants to give us the hope that even though, yes, there's a Ruach Shtus, you could say, okay, so what am I supposed to do? I have had a moment of insanity. No, because the Chachma is still there. And therefore, if you use your Chachma and you think about it, and you realize that even a small so-called, what you think is a small sin, a small form of disconnect, and it's not so destructive because of the Ruach Shtus, the Chachma is able to go beyond the Ruach Shtus. Remember back in chapter 12 where he spoke about Yusin HaChachma min HaSichlus. Sichlus, he called it. That the Sichlus, the folly of the animal soul, is dispelled like darkness naturally by the light of the divine soul, of the Chachma of the divine soul. The same idea here. So Chachma has the ability to dispel that darkness. So you have an ability to get beyond the moment of folly, but you need to think about it. So you think that God is the only reality. And anything you do, doesn't have to be pure Avodah Zarah in the full sense of the word, is really in a form of Avodah Zarah. Elikim Acherim. Because you've allowed something that's not God into your life. Okay. So this also helps us deal with the rationalizations and the justifications people come up with for anything. Due to our emotions and subjectivity, we can come up, Sheikhid Ya'aver Einei Chachamim. Interesting, the word Chachamim. Sheikhid, bias, prejudice, bribery, blinds the eyes of the wise. What is it blinding? It's blinding the wise, the Chachma. So the Chachma remains intact. But for all practical purposes, you're not acting on the Chachma. You're acting on the lower levels where the Ruach Shtus has an impact. But ad Chachma lo yad b'chlal. But not the Chachma. So we can, something to hold on to here. But now he goes back to sum up. Aval be'emes la'amite, says the Alter Rebbe, as he sums this up. Afila aveda kala, but in truth, if you're able to go beyond that moment of blindness and insanity, that in truth, actual reality, afila aveda kala, even a minor transgression, Hare ha'evra, the person who violates Oivel al rotzna elyon baruch hu. So even if it's called Aveda Kala, called a lenient transgression, if you wish. A minor transgression, the person is violating the divine will. And as a result, as soon as you defy the God's will, you're violating divine will. So the divine will can't be split in parts and say, oh, you violated 90% of it. A bigger part, but a little part doesn't matter so much. No. It's all part of one reality, the divine will. Because the divine will is one with God, so now you, by violating it, you're in a state of complete detachment from God's unified reality and oneness. Because, as I said, unity can't be split into pieces. Even if one drop is missing. It's not a matter of quantity. And doing so, like he said earlier, this is worse. If you go back earlier to the chapter, in the chapter he said this is worse than the sitra achra and klipa, the other side, and the shells. Hanikras elikim acherim v'aveda zara mamish. Forces that are referred to other gods and literal idolatry. Because like we said there it's not manifest in the body, and there it's spiritual forces of concealment, but they can't defy God's will. And here you have. And it doesn't matter whether in your eyes it's a small thing or a big thing. You've, so to speak, compromised the integrity of divine unity, which is so central to the themes that we're learning here already back from chapter 20 and on. So Anochi, Hashem Elokecha, encompasses all the positive mitzvahs, the expression of divine unity. And Lo Yilecha Elikim Acherim encompasses everything that defies divine unity. Anything that goes into a world of duality where there's something else but God, as we're learning here. And that's only possible because there's some blindness, because there's a ruach shtus. Now the Alter Rebbe, just to drive the point home, will continue and say, now he said it's worse than klippus and sitra achra. Or sitra achra and klippa, he called it, the other order. Now he says it's even worse than something that is a result of klippa and sitra achra. In this world, we have objects, we have items, we have animals, we have entities that receive their energy from the negative energy. That's why they're forbidden. Forbidden animals from eating them, non-kosher animals. Not because the animal in any way is a bad animal. God created them. And they're animals that you're not allowed to eat, but you're allowed to use. You can ride on a horse. You can use other animals. For eating, you're not allowed to eat them because they're what we call shalosh klippos atmeis. They receive their energy from place that you're supposed to stay away from, as he explained earlier in chapter 7 in Tanya. So he's going to say now that's not just worse than the klippos and sitra achra themselves. But it's also worse than these creatures. So he says, this transgressor is also lower than all those things in the world which are powered by klippa. Shehem behemus tmeis. They are the non-kosher cattle. V'chayis v'ephus, wild animals and non-kosher birds, tmeim, shkotzim u'ramoshim, and insects and reptiles. Why is it worse? Because they didn't do anything to go against God. And in many ways, this helps explain also earlier, before he spoke about klippos and sitra achra, which are more energy form. Here we're talking about actually a product of the klippos and sitra achra. And you see it clearly. None of them have done something against what God wants. They were created this way. They have no free will. And yet they are off limits. So they have never transgressed. That's the key thing to keep in mind. And he brings a Maimer Chazal that demonstrates that. Ukamaimer, Yitush Kodmach. Yitush Kodmecha, actually. Kedomecha. Yitush Kedomecha. So this is in the Sanhedrin, Daf Lamed Ches Aleph, Lamed 38a. The mosquito preceded you. It says that when a person sins, remember you were created last, the human being, the last day, the sixth day. Even a mosquito preceded you. So it's a lesson in humility. So he says, Pirush, the af yitur shamachnis ve'ena meitze. Even a mosquito, which is a selfish creature, it ingests but does not expel. It takes blood from a person, but does not expel. It doesn't give. It only takes and doesn't give, which means it's coming from such a low level. She klipa hayesa tachtena. This is the lowest level of klipa. And therefore distant from the powers of holiness, because holiness is all the opposite, constantly giving even to the most distant. Nevertheless, it precedes the transgressor. Why? Because it never transgressed. Didn't go against what God created it to do. It is what it is. So this is going to come to teach us actually how much more so the Ruach Shtus plays a role, because how is it possible that a person can fall so low? It's only because of the blindness, as we shall continue in the next year. So we'll stop here with understanding that all this is meant to bring out from us the awareness and cognizance of the divine unity that doesn't allow the insanity to affect us. Everyone have a good tavach. TanyaApplied.com. You can find this in all previous programs. Be well.
This has been My Life, Tanya Applied with Rabbi Simon Jacobson. Please join us again next week. Visit ChasidusApplied.com for archived classes and more resources.